Hyunwoo walked into the massive chamber and felt like an ant entering a stadium built for giants. The Galactic Council chamber stretched so high above him that he could barely see the ceiling through the strange purple mist that floated near the top. Alien beings filled the curved rows of seats that wrapped around the central platform where he now stood. Some of these beings were twice his height and made of what looked like living crystal that sparkled with inner light. Others were just clouds of green gas floating inside clear containers that had robot arms sticking out of them. The strangest ones looked like giant insects but walked on two legs and wore fancy robes covered in symbols that hurt his eyes to look at. So Young stood beside him wearing her best military uniform, but she looked just as small and out of place as he did. She had been Earth's top military officer for 10 years and had never backed down from any fight, but even she seemed nervous in this place. Her hand stayed close to her side where her weapon would normally be, but weapons were not allowed in the council chamber. Not that her small human gun would do much good against beings who could survive in the vacuum of space, or who were made of pure energy. The speaker of the council was a creature called Vex Thul, who looked like a mix between a spider and a tree. Its voice came from somewhere deep inside its body and sounded like rocks grinding together when it spoke. The beings from the planet called Earth have come to request membership in our great council, it said, and several of the aliens made sounds that Hyunwoo guessed were probably laughter, even though they sounded nothing like human laughter. Hyunwoo had practiced his speech for months, but standing here in front of creatures who had been traveling between stars since before humans discovered fire made his words feel foolish. Still, he stepped forward and began to speak. Honored council members, we come here today to show that humanity deserves a place among the great civilizations of the galaxy, he said. His voice echoed strangely in the huge chamber and sounded thin and weak compared to the booming voices of the aliens. One of the crystal beings stood up and its body flashed with bright colors as it spoke. Tell us, human, what makes your species worthy of joining civilizations that have mastered the forces of creation itself, it said. What technologies do you bring that we have not already perfected 1,000 times over? Hyunwoo felt sweat on his forehead, but he continued with his prepared speech. We have developed nuclear power and have begun to explore our solar system, he said. We have created global communication networks and have learned to manipulate genetic codes. The chamber filled with sounds that were definitely laughter now. One of the gas cloud beings spoke through its robot arms and its voice sounded like wind through metal tubes. They speak of nuclear power as if it were an achievement, it said. We have been drawing power from the hearts of stars since before their sun was born. Another alien that looked like a walking pile of rocks covered in moss spoke up. They have explored their single moon and sent tiny metal boxes to nearby planets, it said. We have built cities in the cores of gas giants and farm entire star systems for food. The insect-like beings all spoke at the same time in voices that buzzed and clicked. They claimed to have learned genetic manipulation, yet they still age and die from simple cellular breakdown, they said. They have not even learned to upload their minds or clone their bodies. They are still trapped in single biological forms. Vexthul raised one of its many arms for silence. Let us review the official data about these humans, it said, and a screen of light appeared in the air showing information about Earth. Average lifespan of 80 local years. Single planet civilization. Primary weapons still use chemical explosives to launch metal projectiles. Most primitive of all, they exist as individual consciousnesses instead of joining together in proper collective minds. More laughter filled the chamber. So Young's jaw tightened, and Hyunwoo could see she wanted to say something, but they had agreed that he would do all the talking. Arguing with beings who could destroy Earth with a thought would not be wise. A new alien spoke from the highest row of seats. This one was so strange that Hyunwoo could not even guess what it was made of. Its voice sounded like music played backwards. These humans still fight wars among themselves over imaginary boundaries drawn on dirt, it said. They consume the flesh of other biological creatures like savages. They have not even learned to extract energy directly from matter. Most amusing of all, they believe their individual thoughts and dreams make them special. Vexthul looked down at Hyunwoo and its many eyes blinked in sequence. "Human ambassador, do you understand what you're asking?" it said. "This council contains civilizations that have existed for millions of your years. We have seen the birth and death of entire galaxies. We create new forms of life for entertainment, and reshape reality itself when we become bored. What could beings who still live in biological bodies and think with chemical reactions possibly offer us?" Hyunwoo felt his face burning with embarrassment, but he forced himself to stand straight. "We offer our determination to grow and learn," he said. "We offer our willingness to work together with other species. We offer our curiosity about the universe and our desire to make things better for all living beings." The laughter that followed was so loud it made the chamber shake. Several aliens fell over from laughing too hard, and one of the gas clouds started spinning so fast its container nearly broke. Even Vexthul made a sound like grinding stones that might have been laughter. "How wonderfully naive," said the crystal being. "They speak of determination as if it were rare. They mention curiosity as if we had not explored every mystery the universe contains. They offer to make things better when they cannot even stop their own kind from dying of diseases we cured eons ago." Vexthul called for order, and the laughter slowly died down. "The council has heard your request, human," it said. "We will now vote on what status to grant your species." The vote did not take long. Lights of different colors flashed throughout the chamber as the aliens communicated in ways humans could not understand. Finally, Vexthul spoke again. "By unanimous decision, the council grants humanity observer species status," it said. "You will be assigned a small territory in the outer rim, far from important trade routes or strategic resources. You may watch and learn from true civilizations, but you may not participate in council decisions or claim any rights to advanced technologies." Hyunwoo felt his heart sink, but he managed to keep his voice steady. "We accept this decision and thank the council for its consideration," he said. As they prepared to leave, So Young whispered to him. "Observer status is better than being destroyed," she said. "At least now we have a chance." Hyunwoo nodded, but he was thinking about something else. During all the laughter and mockery, he had been watching the aliens carefully. They were powerful beyond human understanding, but they were also arrogant. They had grown comfortable in their superiority and believed nothing could ever challenge them. In his experience, that kind of arrogance was always a weakness waiting to be exploited. Jinho, their young aide, was waiting for them outside the chamber. "How did it go?" he asked, though their faces probably already told him the answer. "We are now the galaxy's official comedy act," So Young said bitterly. But Hyunwoo was still thinking about what he had observed. "Maybe that is exactly where we want to be," he said quietly. "Nobody ever expects the comedy act to be dangerous." 5 years had passed since humanity received its observer status, and the galaxy had mostly forgotten about the small species from the outer rim. The great civilizations continued their ancient games of politics and trade while humans quietly worked in their assigned territory far from anywhere important. Most aliens assumed the humans were struggling to survive on the few worthless worlds they had been given, but Dr. HFY was discovering something very different. She stood in her laboratory on the research station orbiting Kepler 442b and stared at the data that made no sense according to everything the aliens had taught them about biology and adaptation. The human colonists on the planet below were not just surviving in conditions that should have killed them within days. They were actually thriving in ways that seemed impossible. Kepler 442b was supposed to be uninhabitable. The atmosphere contained gases that were poisonous to most known life forms. The gravity was twice what humans had evolved for. The temperature swung between extremes that would freeze or boil most biological creatures. The radiation from the local star should have sterilized the surface. Yet somehow, 2,000 human colonists were not only alive but actually growing their own food and building permanent cities. "Dr. HFY, you need to see this," called her assistant Dongho from across the lab. He was pointing at a screen showing biological readings from the colonists below. "Their cellular structure is changing faster than should be possible." HFY walked over and looked at the data. The humans on Kepler 442b were adapting to their environment in real time. Their lung capacity was increasing to handle the thin atmosphere. Their bone density was growing to cope with the higher gravity. Their skin was developing natural protection against the deadly radiation. Most incredible of all these changes were happening within single lifetimes instead of taking thousands of generations like normal evolution. How are they doing this? Dongho asked. Our biology textbooks say this kind of adaptation should take millions of years. HFY was beginning to understand something that the aliens had missed about humanity. I think we have been looking at this wrong, she said. The aliens see adaptation as something that happens slowly over time through genetic changes. But humans adapt in other ways too. We adapt our technology, our tactics, our thinking, our culture. We do not just change our bodies to fit the environment. We change everything about ourselves, including the environment itself. She pulled up more data from other human colonies. The pattern was the same everywhere. Humans were not just surviving on worlds that the aliens had written off as impossible. They were turning those worlds into homes. On ice worlds, they were building geothermal cities that turned frozen wastelands into gardens. On desert planets, they were using solar collection systems that made the harsh sun into a source of unlimited power. On worlds with poisonous atmospheres, they were developing air processing systems that turned toxic gases into breathable air. Captain Tae-hyun had been sending reports from the exploration ship New Seoul that painted an even more interesting picture. Human merchants were starting to appear in alien markets with goods that no one expected. Rare minerals from worlds that were supposed to be impossible to mine. Biological samples from creatures that were supposed to be extinct. Energy cells that stored power more efficiently than anything the aliens had developed. The aliens noticed these things, but they assumed humans were just getting lucky, or finding leftover artifacts from ancient civilizations. They could not imagine that the primitive species from the Outer Rim was actually creating new technologies that surpassed their own ancient methods. Commander Nari was making even more surprising discoveries about human military development. She ran the training programs for Earth's defense forces and had been quietly testing human soldiers against simulated alien combat scenarios. What she found was that human warfare tactics were completely different from anything the aliens understood. Most alien civilizations fought wars the same way they had for millions of years. The crystal beings used their natural armor and energy weapons in direct frontal attacks. The gas cloud species overwhelmed enemies with swarms of robot drones. The insect races fought as collective minds that moved like single organisms. All of their tactics were based on using their natural advantages in predictable ways. Human soldiers were different. They did not have natural armor or energy weapons or collective minds, but they had something else. They could think creatively under pressure. They could adapt their tactics in the middle of battle. They could work together as a team while still making individual decisions. Most importantly, they could learn from every fight and become better the next time. Nari had run thousands of combat simulations, and the results were always the same. In the first battle against any alien force, the humans would usually lose badly. But by the second battle, they would do much better. By the third battle, they would often win. By the 10th battle, they would dominate completely. The aliens never seemed to learn or change, but humans got better every single time. Admiral Dong-min was putting together the bigger picture from his office in the Earth Defense Command. Intelligence. Reports were coming in from across the galaxy that painted a picture the aliens were not seeing. Human colonies were spreading faster than anyone expected. Human trade ships were establishing routes that gave them access to strategic resources. Human diplomats were making friends with smaller alien species that had been ignored by the great powers. Most importantly, humans were learning. Every piece of alien technology they encountered was being studied and understood. Every alien custom they observed was being analyzed for useful information. Every alien weakness they discovered was being quietly filed away for future use. "Admiral, we are getting reports that worry me," said his intelligence chief Hai-jin. "The Klaxon swarm is starting to ask questions about human activities in Sector 7. The Vorthak Crystal Empire is wondering why human ships keep passing through their territory on routine trade missions. Some of the minor species are reporting that human diplomats are asking very specific questions about galactic politics and military capabilities." Dong-min nodded. He had expected this to happen eventually. How long do you think we have before they realize what is really going on? Maybe 2 years if we are careful, He-Jin said. Maybe less if we make any obvious mistakes. The Admiral looked at the star maps showing human expansion throughout their assigned territory and beyond. What the aliens saw as scattered settlements of a weak species was actually a carefully planned network of bases and supply lines. What they thought was primitive exploration was actually detailed intelligence gathering. What they believed was simple trade was actually the foundation of a growing economic and military power. Dr. Wu Jin was the person who understood best how all the pieces fit together. As Earth's chief technology officer, he coordinated the research teams that were reverse engineering alien technology and developing new human innovations. His teams had made breakthroughs that would have shocked the aliens if they had known about them. Human engineers had figured out how to combine alien technologies in ways their original creators never imagined. Forthak crystal technology could be merged with Netherian phase manipulation to create new types of faster-than-light drives. Klaxon, biological engineering could be adapted to work with human genetic structures to enhance natural healing and adaptation. Energy systems from a dozen different alien races could be combined into power sources that were more efficient than any single technology alone. The key was that humans approached technology differently than aliens did. Each alien race had perfected their own specialties over millions of years, but they rarely shared knowledge with other species and almost never tried to combine different technologies. Humans had no pride about using other species' inventions and no hesitation about mixing technologies that were never meant to work together. We are not trying to compete with alien civilizations in their areas of strength, Wu Jin explained to his research team. We are creating entirely new areas where our ability to adapt and combine different approaches gives us advantages they cannot match. The results were starting to show. Human ships were faster and more versatile than alien vessels that were technically more advanced. Human weapons were less powerful than alien energy cannons, but they were more accurate and used ammunition that was cheaper to produce. Human armor was not as strong as alien crystal shells, but it was lighter and allowed for better mobility. Most importantly, human technology was designed by humans for humans. Alien technology was often thousands of years old and designed for species with very different needs and abilities. When humans adapted alien technology, they made it work better for human strengths and capabilities. As the 5th year of observer status came to an end, a few aliens were starting to notice that something was changing in the outer rim. Trade reports showed that human goods were becoming more common in galactic markets. Intelligence summaries mentioned that human ships were being spotted in more and more systems. Diplomatic contacts reported that human representatives were asking more sophisticated questions about galactic politics. But the great alien civilizations were too busy with their own ancient rivalries and too confident in their superiority to pay much attention to reports about the galaxy's F. The first real test came when the Klaxon swarm decided that humans had been getting too comfortable in their assigned territory. The insect-like aliens had been watching human mining operations on Kepler 442b with growing irritation. According to their calculations, the humans were extracting far more valuable materials from the supposedly worthless planet than should have been possible. They decided it was time to remind the joke species who really controlled the galaxy. Colonel Min-Su received the warning message while he was inspecting the defensive positions around New Busan, the largest human settlement on Kepler 442b. The message was delivered by a Klaxon drone that materialized in his office without warning and spoke in the buzzing, clicking voice of the swarm mind. Human creatures, you have violated galactic law by exceeding your authorized resource extraction limits, the drone said. The Klaxon swarm will arrive in 72 hours to confiscate your illegal mining equipment and relocate your population to a more suitable location for primitive species. Min-Su had been expecting something like this to happen eventually. Human intelligence had been tracking Klaxon patrol movements for months and had noticed them paying more attention to human space. He activated the colony's emergency communication system and sent an alert to every human facility on the planet and in orbit. Yunji was the supervisor of the largest mining complex, and she received the alert while deep underground checking on the extraction operations. She had served in Earth's military before taking this civilian job, and she knew what the alert meant. The humans had always known this day might come, and they had been preparing for it. What the Klaxon did not know was that the mining equipment they planned to confiscate could be converted into weapons in less than 6 hours. The industrial lasers, used for cutting through rock, could be recalibrated to slice through Klaxon carapaces. The mass drivers that launched ore containers into orbit could be loaded with explosive charges instead. The fusion reactors that powered the mining operations could be overloaded to create devastating explosions. More importantly, the human miners were not the helpless civilians the Klaxon expected. Every human who volunteered for colony duty received basic military training before leaving Earth. They knew how to fight and they knew how to work together under pressure. They also knew things about Klaxon biology and tactics that the aliens would never have expected them to learn. When the Klaxon fleet arrived, it consisted of 12 bioships, each one looking like a giant insect made of living metal. The ships moved in perfect formation because they were controlled by a single collective mind that coordinated every action. This was supposed to be their greatest strength, but human military analysts had identified it as a critical weakness. The Klaxon expected to face panicked individual humans running around in confusion without any coordination. Instead, they encountered something their collective mind could not process. The humans fought both as individuals and as unified groups at the same time. Each human soldier made independent decisions, but those decisions somehow worked together to create larger tactical patterns. Min-Su coordinated the overall defense from his command bunker, but he did not try to control every individual action like the Klaxon swarm mind did. Instead, he gave his soldiers general objectives and let them figure out the best ways to achieve those goals. This meant that when the Klaxon tried to predict human behavior, they found that there was no single pattern to analyze. The first Klaxon. Landing ships expected to overwhelm human positions with pure numbers. Each bioship carried thousands of warrior drones that could coordinate their attacks with perfect precision. But when they landed, they found that the humans had done something impossible according to Klaxon military doctrine. The mining complex had been turned into a fortress that combined individual fighting positions with coordinated fields of fire. Each human defender was responsible for their own section, but their positions were designed to support each other. When Klaxon drones tried to overwhelm one position, they found themselves caught in crossfire from multiple directions. Worse, the human weapons were specifically designed to counter Klaxon advantages. The aliens relied on their natural armor and their ability to replace fallen drones quickly. Human weapons used ammunition that created secondary explosions inside Klaxon, bodies making their armor useless. Human tactics focused on disrupting Klaxon coordination rather than just killing individual drones. Yunji led a team of miners in an attack that showed how much humans had learned about their enemies. Instead of trying to fight the Klaxon swarm, directly they targeted the bioships that were generating new drones to replace the ones being killed. Using converted mining equipment, they tunneled under the landing sites and planted explosives that destroyed 3 bioships from below. The Klaxon collective mind had never encountered this type of warfare. Their entire military doctrine was based on overwhelming individual opponents with superior numbers and coordination. They had no response to enemies who could fight as individuals while maintaining unit cohesion, or who could attack from unexpected directions using improvised weapons. After 6 hours of fighting, the Klaxon made a decision that shocked both sides. They retreated. The mighty swarm that had conquered dozens of star systems over millions of years was defeated by a few thousand human miners using converted industrial equipment. The news of the Klaxon defeat spread through the galaxy faster than anyone expected. What made it even more shocking was that the humans had not just won, they had won easily. The battle reports showed that human casualties were minimal, while Klaxon losses were devastating. Council military advisor Yoon Seo was originally from Vorthak space but had become a naturalized human citizen years earlier. She understood both alien and human military thinking, and she could see patterns that terrified her. The humans had not just gotten lucky against the Klaxon, they had demonstrated tactical capabilities that surpassed anything in the galactic military databases. The most frightening thing was that the humans had clearly been preparing for this fight for a long time. Their defensive positions were too well planned to have been improvised. Their weapons were too perfectly designed to counter Klaxon advantages to have been created quickly. Their tactics showed a deep understanding of Klaxon weaknesses that could only have come from years of careful study. Yun Seo sent a classified report to the Galactic Council warning them that humanity was not the primitive species they believed. Her report included detailed analysis of the battle showing how human tactics exploited fundamental weaknesses in traditional alien military doctrine. She recommended that the Council conduct a full investigation of human capabilities before any other species attempted to challenge them. The report was filed away and ignored. The Council members were too proud to believe that the galaxy's former joke species could pose any real threat to civilizations that had mastered warfare millions of years ago. They assumed the Klaxon defeat was a fluke that would not be repeated. Dr. Wu Jin knew better. From his laboratory on Earth, he had been monitoring the battle and analyzing the performance of human weapons and tactics. What he saw confirmed his theories about human advantages over alien civilizations. Humans did not try to match alien strengths directly. Instead, they found ways to make alien strengths into weaknesses. The Klaxon collective mind was supposed to be unbeatable because it could coordinate thousands of actions perfectly. But that same coordination became a weakness when humans attacked the bioships that housed the collective intelligence. The Klaxon natural armor was supposed to make them nearly invulnerable, but it became useless when humans developed weapons that caused internal explosions. Most importantly, the Klaxon had no experience fighting opponents who could adapt during battle. Their millions of years of military success had made them predictable. They used the same tactics that had worked for eons because those tactics had always been sufficient. They had never needed to develop new strategies or learn from defeats, because they had rarely lost. Humans were different. Every battle was a learning experience. Every defeat taught them how to win the next fight. Every enemy mistake was studied and catalogued for future use. The Klaxon had superior technology and vast experience, but humans had something more valuable. They had the ability to change and grow. News of the human victory began to change how other species viewed humanity. The minor alien races who had been ignored by the great powers started paying attention to human diplomatic overtures. If humans could defeat the mighty Klaxon swarm, then maybe they were worth taking seriously as potential allies. More importantly, the great alien civilizations began to realize that their assumptions about human primitiveness might be wrong. Intelligence. Reports started flowing in about human activities throughout the galaxy. The picture they painted was disturbing. Human trade ships were visiting systems that had no obvious commercial value. Human diplomatic missions were asking detailed questions about military capabilities and political relationships. Human research stations were studying alien technologies and biological samples with suspicious intensity. Human colonies were being. The emergency session of the Galactic Council was called 3 months after the Klaxon defeat, and the chamber that had once echoed with laughter at human primitiveness now buzzed with nervous energy. Reports were flooding in from across the galaxy about human activities that made no sense according to everything the great civilizations thought they knew about the species they had dismissed as harmless observers. Fleet. Admiral Bora stood at the center of the chamber where Hyunwoo had once been mocked, and presented intelligence data that sent shockwaves through the assembled alien representatives. The humans now controlled 47 star systems compared to the 12 they had been assigned. They had established military alliances with 18 minor species that the great powers had ignored. Most shocking of all, they operated the largest independent merchant fleet in the galaxy. "This cannot be accurate," buzzed the Klaxon representative speaking through a replacement drone since their original swarm mind had been damaged in the battle at Kepler 442b. "Our intelligence shows that humans are primitive beings with limited technological capabilities." Bora activated a holographic display that showed the true extent of human expansion. "Your intelligence is 5 years out of date," she said calmly. "During that time, humanity has established a presence in every major star cluster and has developed technologies that your species have not seen before." The Vorthak crystal, being that served as military commander, flashed angry red colors. "Impossible," it said. "We have monitored human space continuously. Their settlements are small, and their ships are few. They pose no threat to established galactic powers. That is what they wanted you to believe, Bora replied. She activated another display showing human ships that had been disguised as simple trading vessels. What you classified as merchant ships are actually military vessels with firepower exceeding your own dreadnoughts. What you believed were civilian colonies are forward military bases with defensive capabilities that rival fortress worlds, Ambassador. Seokjin had replaced Hyunwoo as humanity's representative to the Council, and he watched the alien reactions with quiet satisfaction. The beings who had once laughed at human requests for membership now looked confused and frightened. Their assumptions about galactic hierarchy were being challenged by facts they could not deny. The gas cloud Netherian spoke through its mechanical translation system. Even if this data is accurate, humans cannot challenge civilizations that have existed for millions of years, it said. We have technologies and knowledge that primitive species cannot comprehend. Seokjin stepped forward, and his voice carried none of the pleading tone that Hyunwoo had used years earlier. Honored council members, humanity has never claimed to match your ancient achievements, he said. We have simply chosen to excel in areas where age and tradition are less important than adaptability and innovation. He gestured, and the chamber's display systems showed detailed analysis of recent human activities. Every accusation the aliens had made was addressed with calm explanations that revealed the scope of human planning. Yes, humans had expanded beyond their assigned territory, but they had done so without violating any galactic laws. Yes, they had formed military alliances, but only with species that were not under council protection. Yes, they controlled strategic resources, but only those that other civilizations had abandoned as worthless. The most disturbing revelation was that humans had achieved all of this without breaking a single treaty or regulation. They had found loopholes in galactic law that species with millions of years of legal experience had never noticed. They had exploited bureaucratic inefficiencies that ancient civilizations had never bothered to fix. Most importantly, they had done it all while maintaining the appearance of harmless observers who posed no threat to anyone. Council Speaker Vexthal raised multiple arms for silence as arguments broke out among the assembled representatives. Human ambassador, it said. Explain how your species has achieved such expansion without our knowledge. Seokjin smiled politely. Honored speaker, your knowledge was always perfect, but your attention was focused on more important matters, he said. Great. Civilizations naturally concern themselves with great affairs. Small matters like human trade routes or human research stations did not seem worthy of your valuable time. The insult was delivered so smoothly that some of the aliens did not immediately recognize it. Humans had grown and expanded right under the noses of supposedly superior beings because those beings had been too arrogant to pay attention. The galaxy's joke species had turned the great power's own pride against them. The Vorthak military commander's crystal body flashed through several angry colors before settling on deep red. This expansion ends now, it declared. The Vorthak Empire will establish a blockade around human space to contain this threat before it grows larger. This was exactly what human military planners had been expecting. Captain Subin received the blockade orders while commanding the converted freighter Busan's Pride in the Helix Nebula system. Her ship looked like a simple cargo vessel, but it carried more firepower than most alien battleships. More importantly, it used propulsion systems that the Vorthak had never encountered. The Vorthak blockade fleet took positions around what they believed were the main routes into human space. Their crystal ships were massive and beautiful, and their energy weapons could destroy planets if necessary. They waited for human vessels to approach so they could demonstrate the consequences of challenging ancient galactic powers. What they got instead was a lesson in why human military doctrine was superior to alien traditions. Subin's ship did not approach the blockade through normal space. Instead, it used a combination of Netherian phase technology and Klaxon biological systems that allowed it to bypass the blockade entirely. The Busan's Pride materialized inside the Vorthak formation and opened fire before the aliens realized what was happening. Human weapons did not try to match the raw power of Vorthak energy cannons. Instead, they were designed specifically to exploit weaknesses in crystal ship construction that human engineers had discovered through careful study. The first Vorthak ship to be hit simply shattered like glass. The crystal hull that was supposed to provide perfect protection became a weakness when hit by weapons that created harmonic vibrations at exactly the right frequency. The second ship tried to return fire but found that the human vessel had already moved to a new position, using propulsion systems that made conventional tracking impossible. Within 30 minutes, the entire Vorthak blockade fleet was either destroyed or retreating. The crystal beings who had ruled their corner of the galaxy for eons had been defeated by a single human ship that they had mistaken for a harmless cargo vessel. News of the Vorthak defeat spread even faster than reports of the Klaxon battle. Two of the galaxy's greatest military powers had been humiliated by the species they had dismissed as primitive observers. Other alien civilizations began to reconsider their assumptions about human capabilities. The Netherian collective sent diplomatic messages to human representatives, suggesting that perhaps it was time to discuss mutual cooperation. The minor species that had been ignored by the great powers began openly allying themselves with humanity. Even some individual members of the major alien races started defecting to human space, seeking opportunities that their own rigid civilizations could not provide. Dr. Wu Jin analyzed the battle reports from both major human victories and confirmed what he had suspected. Alien military technology was incredibly advanced, but it was also incredibly specialized. Each species had perfected weapons and tactics that worked perfectly against the enemies they had fought for millions of years. But they had never needed to adapt to completely new types of threats. Humans approached warfare differently. They studied their enemies carefully and designed weapons specifically to counter alien advantages. They used mobility and unpredictability instead of trying to match alien firepower directly. Most importantly, they never fought the same way twice, because they were always learning and improving. The great alien civilizations were discovering that their greatest strength was also their greatest weakness. Their millions of years of success had made them predictable. They used the same strategies that had worked forever because those strategies had always been sufficient. They had never needed to innovate or adapt because they had always been the most powerful forces in the galaxy. Humans were different. They had spent their entire history fighting enemies who were bigger, stronger, and more numerous than themselves. They had learned to survive through cunning adaptation and cooperation. They were used to being underdogs, and they knew how to turn disadvantages into advantages. General Kyung-ho was coordinating human military responses from his headquarters on Earth, and he could see the bigger picture that individual battles revealed. Humanity was not just winning fights against superior opponents. They were demonstrating that the entire foundation of galactic military doctrine was flawed. Alien warfare was based on the idea that superior technology and overwhelming force would always defeat inferior opponents. Human warfare was based on the idea that intelligence, adaptation, and teamwork could overcome any advantage. The humans were proving that their approach was more effective in the long run. More importantly, humans were fighting on multiple fronts simultaneously. While President Jae-won walked into the same Galactic Council chamber where Hyun-woo had once stood as a supplicant, begging for acceptance, but the atmosphere was completely different now. The aliens who had once laughed at human requests for membership now watched her with careful attention mixed with fear. The great civilizations that had ruled the galaxy for millions of years were facing a reality they had never imagined possible. General Kyung-ho stood beside her wearing the uniform of the United Earth Federation Defense Forces. His presence was both symbolic and practical. Symbolic because it showed that humanity now spoke from a position of military strength. Practical because every alien in the chamber knew that human military capabilities had already been proven against their most powerful forces. The chamber itself had not changed, but the power dynamics within it were completely different. The Vorthak crystal beings sat in subdued colors instead of their usual brilliant displays. The Klaxon swarm representatives spoke only when directly addressed instead of chattering constantly among themselves. Even the ancient gas cloud Netherians seemed less confident in their floating containers. Council Speaker Vexthul called the session to order with obvious reluctance. President J1 of the United Earth Federation has requested to address this emergency session, it said. The Council recognizes that recent events have created new circumstances that require discussion. J1 stepped forward, and her voice carried none of the pleading tone that human representatives had used in the past. Honored Council members, I come before you today not to request anything but to offer you choices, she said. The galaxy has changed whether you recognize it or not. The question now is how you will adapt to the new reality. She gestured, and the chamber's displays showed the current state of galactic affairs. Human influence had spread far beyond what anyone had expected. Economic data showed that human trade networks now handled 30% of all galactic commerce. Diplomatic reports revealed that 42 species had formal alliance agreements with humanity. Military intelligence confirmed that human forces could project power into any region of known space. This is impossible, declared the Vorthak military commander, though its crystal body showed colors of uncertainty rather than anger. No single species can achieve such expansion in mere decades. Your kind existed in a single star system only years ago. You are correct that rapid expansion is unusual, J1 replied calmly. But you assume that expansion requires the same methods your civilizations used millions of years ago. Humanity has developed approaches that work more efficiently in the current galactic environment. She activated another display, showing the fundamental differences between human and alien expansion strategies. Ancient civilizations had grown slowly over vast periods of time, by conquering territory and imposing their will on other species. Humans had grown quickly, by forming partnerships and creating mutual benefits that made other species want to work with them. The Netherian collective spoke through its mechanical systems. Even if humans have achieved temporary influence, you cannot maintain it against civilizations with millions of years of experience and resources, it said. Your expansion will collapse when you encounter real resistance. Admiral Chang Ho stepped forward to respond to this challenge. Honored Netherian representative, you speak of experience and resources as if they were advantages, he said. But human analysis suggests that your ancient methods have become weaknesses in the modern galactic environment. He showed data comparing alien and human operational efficiency. The great civilizations were powerful, but they were also slow, bureaucratic, and resistant to change. They made decisions through ancient processes that took years to complete. They solved problems using methods that had worked millions of years ago, but were no longer optimal. Humans made decisions, quickly adapted to new situations rapidly, and solved problems using whatever methods worked best regardless of tradition. They had no pride about borrowing alien technologies and no hesitation about abandoning approaches that stopped working. Most importantly, humans had learned to see the galaxy as a complex, interconnected system instead of a collection of separate territories to be conquered. They understood that economic influence could be more powerful than military force and that voluntary cooperation was more stable than forced submission. We offer you partnership, not conquest, J1 continued. Humanity has no desire to rule over other species or to impose human values on alien civilizations. We seek to create a galactic community where every species can contribute their strengths and benefit from the strengths of others. This offer confused many of the alien representatives, because it was unlike anything in their historical experience. Great powers had always sought to dominate lesser powers. Victory had always meant the subjugation of the defeated. The idea of voluntary cooperation between equals was foreign to civilizations that had organized themselves around rigid hierarchies. But some species were beginning to understand the advantages of the human approach. The Drekmarian Confederacy had been one of the first to form an alliance with humanity, and their representatives spoke up in support of J1's proposal. The human model of cooperation has brought benefits that conquest never provided, the Drekmarian said. Our species has access to technologies and markets that were closed to us under the old system. Human partnership offers growth and progress instead of stagnation and decline. Several other minor species voiced similar support. The galaxy's former joke species had given them opportunities and respect that the great powers had never offered. Human alliance meant being treated as equals instead of subjects or servants. The great civilizations faced a choice that none of them wanted to make. They could accept the new reality and learn to work with humanity as partners. Or they could resist and face the consequences of opposing a power that had already proven its ability to defeat their military forces. The Vorthak chose resistance first. Their crystal empire had ruled through strength for eons, and they could not imagine any other way of existing. But their resistance collapsed within months as human economic pressure and military superiority made their position impossible to maintain. The Klaxon swarm tried to adapt by copying human tactics, but their collective mind structure made true innovation difficult. They eventually accepted a subordinate partnership that allowed them to maintain their territory in exchange for following human leadership in galactic affairs. The Netherian collective proved most flexible of the ancient powers. Their gas cloud nature had always made them more adaptable than solid species, and they successfully integrated into the human alliance system while maintaining their cultural independence. Ambassador Jin A took over human diplomatic efforts as the new galactic order stabilized. She had grown up during humanity's rise from joke species to galactic superpower, and she understood both the old and new ways of conducting interstellar relations. Her office on the rebuilt Council Station reflected the changes that had swept through galactic civilization. Representatives from dozens of species worked together on projects that would have been impossible under the old system of competing empires. Human flexibility had created an environment where cooperation was more rewarding than conflict. The most remarkable change was in how problems were solved. Instead of each species working in isolation and guarding their secrets jealously, the new galactic community shared knowledge and combined different approaches to create better solutions. Technologies that had remained static for millions of years began advancing rapidly as human methods spread throughout the galaxy. Medical breakthroughs came from combining human adaptability research with alien longevity treatments. Transportation systems improved by merging human innovation with alien engineering expertise. Communication networks expanded by linking human flexibility with alien processing power. The galaxy was becoming something new and better than it had ever been before. The rigid hierarchies that had prevented progress for eons were being replaced by dynamic partnerships that encouraged growth and change. Jin Ia often thought about how much had changed since Hyun-woo first stood in the council chamber as a representative of a species that nobody took seriously. Humanity had gone from being the galaxy's joke to being its most important civilization, not through conquest or intimidation, but through proving that cooperation worked better than competition. The species that had been dismissed as primitive, observers had taught the galaxy's ancient powers that strength came not from perfecting old methods, but from constantly developing new ones. The beings who had been mocked for their individual consciousness had shown that diversity of thought was more powerful than collective uniformity. Most importantly, humans had demonstrated that the future belonged to those who could adapt and grow, rather than those who relied on past achievements. The galaxy had learned this lesson the hard way, but it had learned it well. As Jin A prepared for another day of diplomatic meetings with species that had once considered humanity beneath their notice, she smiled at the irony of it all. The galaxy's former comedy act had become its most serious power, not by changing who they were, but by showing everyone else who they could become. The joke had indeed been